money. So it's very important that we're doing what the community wants us to do with this money. The citizens elect a city council to be stewards of the people's money. And every year, the city council estimates the amount of money that will be available for the next year and appropriates or designates how that money will be spent. Now, it's 10 people on the council. How do 10 people agree on that? So the process is that, first of all, the finance department is constantly tracking all of the money that the city earns, collects, and spends. The department heads worked with the finance officer and the mayor to project the revenues and the expenses based upon our history and knowledge. And the finance officer compiles all the data and works with the mayor to estimate the available funds. And this is a big job. What the finance officer does day in, day out, it's really a massive task, and it is constant attention. I don't spend that much attention on it. I get my information from the finance office, but I'm spending a lot more detailed time on it than anyone on the council is. So the budget that I put forward is intended to be something that's a starting point, and if the council could not agree upon any changes to it, my budget would be automatically approved. And so the council needs to act in response to the budget that I propose, particularly if they don't like it. So I'm showing you tonight the proposed budget. A lot of people think that the money that the city has resides in one great big pot, and we hear complaints all the time that, we're spending so much money on this, why don't we spend some of that on that? And it's really not that simple. We have different pots of money, little pots, and each of those pots has its own rules. We collect taxes, they're in one pot. We have service charges, like our sewer fees that we charge. They go in a separate pot with separate rules. We have fees for like our revenue that we get for our recreation programs. They're handled separately. We collect fines, and also we get grants. So every single type of money has a different rule associated with it. If all of the money that the city had were a great big pie, this is what it would look like. I know you can't see those numbers, but this year the airport is the biggest piece of pie. The year 2021, we're building a new airport terminal, and so what is normally a little tiny sliver is actually dominating our budget for that year. So the general fund is the next largest, and capital improvement fund is a very major one as well. The rest of the funds don't make up that much of the pie, but I will go through them. So the enterprise funds are funds that we collect charges for a service that we do. The city has 6 enterprise funds. We have the sanitary sewer, the solid waste, and the airport enterprise funds, which the city council oversees. And that's the sewer and garbage rates, which are set by the council to cover the needs of the departments. And they also contribute toward general government, a certain percent. And the airport fund does not contribute to the general fund because it doesn't support itself. About 40% of the airport's general operation costs are covered by the charges. The rest comes from general taxes. The other enterprise funds are the electric, gas, and water utilities, which are overseen by the Municipal Utilities Board. And they also cover all of the needs of the utilities, plus they contribute toward the general government. The sales and use tax is what we collect, our first and second penny sales tax. It's 2% of charge on sales of goods and services in our community. The first penny goes into the general fund and may be used for any lawful purpose. The general fund is like the junk drawer of city money, because as long as it's lawful, we can spend the general fund on that. So obviously it has the biggest demands. The second penny goes into the capital improvement fund, and that is limited to be spent upon acquisition of land, capital improvements like new streets, new utilities, ambulance, medical and emergency vehicles, transfers to the 911 fund, firefighting vehicles and equipment, debt retirement, and study for potential capital improvements. The gross receipts tax is the third penny sales tax, or we call it the BBB, or the bed, board, and booze tax. It's a 1% tax like the first and second penny sales tax, except it's only on these things, hotel accommodations, that sort of thing. 1% of the gross receipts from lodging, alcohol, dining and carry out food, and entertainment goes into the BBB fund. And it is very restricted to be used on a civic center like the city's event center, our auditorium, our athletic facilities, and it can include operations of those facilities and can also be spent on promotion and advertisement of the city. We collect fees in various different departments, and they generally stay in the department which collected them. So like when the police department issues traffic tickets, those revenues will stay in that department. And they help offset the cost of having a police department. So Park and Rec has fees, Prairie Lakes Wellness Center, library fines, those are all their examples. So if the various different funds were stacked up next to each other in their relative size, this is what it would look like. Now the blue are the enterprise funds, the pink are tax funds, green are fees, and the other are the other brown color. It's so small that you can barely even see it. The airport is right up there next to our largest fund, which is the electric fund, and that is not normally the case. Normally the airport fund is down there between solid waste and the wellness center. But since we're getting a lot of money from the federal government to build our airport terminal, that brings that fund way up. But this is the relative size of the various funds that we're going to talk about. Talk about the general fund first, and some very generalities. I'm just going to run through the changes. The general fund is broken into different categories. The general government fund includes these that I'll talk about first, the mayor and the city council. The changes in that fund, the expenditures are, the mayor's salary will be cut from $80,000 to my proposed $36,000, and the council salary will go up from, I think it's around $11,000 right now, up to $12,000 a year. Yes, and those items will be effective when we get a city manager and our form of government changes. So everybody in the council and the mayor term ends at the end of June. And July 1st, our new city council and newly elected mayor will take effect along with our city manager. We haven't hired a city manager yet, but we're definitely planning for that. It's a new position which is created, and so there's a new amount of money in our budget that's set aside for that. There were no changes to the attorney's budget. The human resources has a payroll position which moved from finance into HR, and so it looks like the budget increased a lot for human resources, but it really didn't change much at all. That's just reflecting a change in where the payroll position reports. Likewise with the finance department, the payroll position was removed from finance and put into human resources. So it looks like we're not spending as much on finance. So those are just shuffling around of a position responsibility for reporting. The external organizations are funded by the city in various amounts. I've proposed no changes to those. I want people to know that these external organizations make a request to be put in the city's budget, and many of them did request an increase, and you'll find that in the budget book, but I froze everyone, so there were no changes there. The information technology department saw a pretty significant increase due to software purchases. The city hall budget had a slight decrease, mainly due to who the janitor is assigned to report to. And the engineering department saw a decrease mainly just because the planner position is moved out of engineering and into our new community development department, which we used to call building services. The public safety section includes police, firefighting, and ambulance. And the police funding, the police budget went up because of the new 3 patrol positions that we're creating with COPS grant funding. So a lot of the increase will be offset with a revenue from the grant. The firefighting budget remained basically the same. The biggest change was that there was an 11% increase in the subsidy that we give the municipal utilities water department to keep their rates low. And it's listed as a hydrant rental fee. And they do have a little bit of increased equipment that they're purchasing and some remodeling that they're doing. And there were no significant changes to the ambulance budget. The public works section of the general fund includes street, snow removal, street lighting, water resources, and cemetery. The street division looks like a decrease, and it's basically the same, except every year we buy expensive equipment for the street department out of the general fund, and it's just a difference in the type of equipment that were in the budget to be purchased for in 2021. It's a little bit less than we're purchasing in 2020. And likewise with snow removal, it's just different types of equipment that we're purchasing in 2021. Costs a little bit less than what we're spending in 2020. The street lighting is seeing a slight decrease in the subsidy, which we transfer from our general fund to the electric department, municipal utilities enterprise fund, because we actually removed light poles. And the subsidy that we give to the street lighting department is based upon how many poles there are. So if we have fewer poles, there's a lesser subsidy. The water resources is seeing no significant changes. The water resources is spending money on public education and outreach, which we're required to do by Congress's Clean Water Act. The cemetery saw just a slight increase due to an equipment purchase, and the budget is so small that even a small equipment purchase looks like a pretty big change. The health and welfare divisions of the general fund include mosquito control and animal control, and there were no changes at all really to those. The culture and recreation division includes forestry and library. And now the forestry saw the biggest increase of any department, and that's because we're proposing to purchase a pretty important piece of equipment to safely remove trees remotely that we know that we're going to need to do in earnest in the coming years because of the emerald ash borer situation. And we also need to hire staff in order to be able to operate this piece of equipment, but that's pretty much entirely for that. There's also another smaller piece of equipment in there increase as well. And the library is seeing a slight increase due to building improvements and equipment. The Community Development Division, as I mentioned before, used to be known as the Building Services Division, and we're updating the position. We had the building official retired, and we took advantage of the opportunity to look at the various needs of that department, which have grown and changed through time. So we've updated that, and we have the planner, which used to report to the city engineer, now reports to the community development director. And we just hired our community development director, and Stacy's in the room back there if you want to wave. I can't remember your last name. Bungard. Okay. General fund transfers is also a general funded department, and there's no change to the transfer to the Park and Rec. The airport would normally receive about $400,000, but thanks to the CARES Act, that's being covered, and we don't have to make that transfer out of our general fund, so that's very nice. So there's a pretty hefty decrease there. And the Upper Big Sioux watershed project has no change, and the E911 has no significant change. So I'm going to go right into the general fund revenues here, and you can look at what we've projected. Now, I want to just make a little statement. Kristen and I have been working on the budget for, quite a while, and just wondering how on earth we're going to estimate what our revenue will be in 2021. This year, more than ever, it's really a pretty major guess. And so we thought, in order to be conservative, that it would be best to budget a decrease. So you can see that the decrease is a little bit more, that we're expecting a little bit more revenue than we received in 2019, but significantly less than we had budgeted for 2020. And the changes include, there's an increase in property tax, $144,000. There's an increase in sales, and that's the 20. Sorry, I'm reading the 2020. Increase in property tax of $113,000 this year. The sales and use tax we expect to decline about $120,000. Interest rates are really low right now, and we're not collecting as much as we've collected in the past couple of years. So the interest revenue is expected to decrease, and we're also expecting some miscellaneous decreases. We will see an increase due to the COPS grant. The fire protection services, that's receiving a decrease. It's pretty slight. And the county road tax is decreasing a little bit, and the special assessments are also decreasing. And if you have specific questions about these, you'll have a chance to ask them when we get through. General fund personnel costs are going up. The city did a wage study, and we've implemented that for most of the departments. We have some budgeted wage increases for city employees, plus we're adding some new city employees. Obviously, the city manager is a big one. That the city manager's going to start expected in June, so we had to add that. There will be a reduction because the city council numbers are going down from 10 to 6, and so we'll have less money in the budget for council salaries. The 3 new patrol officers are added, and the new forestry tech position is added. Overall, there's an increase. The operating budget is it's not very different at all. It's down a little bit due to everyone was asked to keep their budget just the same, and I asked all of the department heads to be very prudent and conservative in what they put in for their operating funds. There's not very much increase at all, except for some of the things that we have no control over. Obviously, the cost of services and things that we buy goes up, but overall there's a budgeted decrease in the operating budget. Capital outlay is a different story. This is the money that we buy equipment with, and this is expected to go up $500,000. So this is computers and software is a big part of that, and then it's kind of blocked by the little symbol there, but that's almost $500,000 for the new grapple saw truck and the dump truck in the forestry department. And these other items on here that I'll just list real quick for those that can't read it: police patrol vehicles, $170,000; fire department equipment, $125,000; street department dump truck, $170,000; street department skid steer, $65,000; snow removal snow blower, $195,000; snow removal dump truck with sander and plow, $170,000; forestry brush chipper, $75,000; and tree inventory, which isn't actually a piece of equipment, but that's a service that's going to cost around $55,000. So there was an increase in the budget for capital outlay from the general fund. Here's the brutal summary. We expect revenues about $17 million, and we're expecting to spend almost $21 million. there's a difference of 3.3 million, and I normally wouldn't present a budget like this. In the past, I've cut back on everything that the departments were doing and requesting in order to make the budget balance. This year, we are being saved by the CARES Act, and the money that we're receiving from the CARES Act, from the federal government through the state, will pay for all of our public safety items. So the salaries of the police and ambulance are covered in the CARES Act, their operating expense, and that will make a big difference. If we end up this year on schedule with our budget revenues, that will all be money that we carry over next year. Now, we do expect to be down. We will be able to collect up to $5 million, but probably at least $4 million from the CARES Act. And that money will just be transferred over as increased revenue that we put aside for a rainy day. And we do expect next year to be a rainy day. So I think that we're more than covered by that carryover that we will receive from the CARES Act. But I certainly understand if the council feels differently. We're going to talk about the opportunities to make the budget balance a little bit better. But you can see the revenues are expected to decrease 2.5%, while at the same time we have a projected increase of expenditures of 5%. So there were some items that were not put into my budget that the departments requested, and I want to make sure that you're aware of that. There were quite a few positions that I didn't put into the budget. One was for HR, and I just want to say that the HR director is overtaxed in what she's trying to do by herself. She certainly could use the help of this position. I just didn't feel that we should put it in when our revenues for the next year are so uncertain. There is a need for all of these positions which were created, and my not honoring them is not a reflection that I don't think there's a need. I do think there's a need, but when you buy a position, when you hire another position, that's an ongoing expense that's really hard to remove once you've done it. It's not a one-time thing, and that's why I haven't put these things into the budget. But another engineer was requested in the engineering department. The IT department requested several new positions: a help desk technician, a content manager, and a part-time position. And the fire department as well requested 2 more firefighter EMTs, and the total of those unmet requests would be $421,000 a year, and that will go up as the salaries go up. I did fulfill in my budget every single capital outlay request that was made, but I told the department heads to only request the things that they felt were absolutely essential. And so I believe that to be true. So with the situation, obviously the CARES Act is projected to save us in 2021, but after that we're on our own, and this is not sustainable. This is not a situation that we can allow to go on. So what tools do we have? We can obviously eliminate non-essential expenditures. The department heads have all done this. We can add a street assessment charge to the property tax bill. Now, we have not done this, but we have discussed this many times. The council has discussed this with the staff. The staff has discussed this. It's a tool that we believe that we need to start using in the very near future. So I put a check mark by it. Adding a stormwater utility charge, we're actively working to do this, and we certainly hope to be able to have this implemented as soon as possible. We're in a little bit of a struggle to get that going, but we are working on it. We need to keep our fees in line. inflation goes up, our fees should go up. There was a time where we didn't raise any of our fees for a great number of years. We did this year increase fees for 2021 for our rec programs. So that one gets a check mark. And we can increase transfers from our enterprise funds. This is a legal tool that we have at our, something that we can use. And as our revenues go up in our solid waste and wastewater enterprise funds, so does the transfer to the general government fund. So I put a check mark by that. This is a summary of the potential revenue that we could have from some of those things that I mentioned. A street assessment could generate anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million, and that has a really important benefit to us, and we definitely want to pursue that. The stormwater utility as well. It's a very good tool. We're one of the few communities in the state that isn't already doing this. The amount of money that we collect from this is variable depending on the fee that we would set, and we haven't set it yet, so we don't know, but it could be anywhere from $300,000 to $1.5 million. Could be a lot more if we wanted to go more, but we probably wouldn't go much beyond that. The benefit it would be to remove some of the costs out of the general fund and put them into the capital improvement fund. The capital improvement fund could also send some funds to that as well, and we could break that out as we do with our wastewater and solid waste utilities if we chose to create its own separate fund. The increase in transfer from the enterprise funds, I did mention that the 8% of revenue from the wastewater and solid waste goes up as our revenue goes up. So we will see an increase in the transfer from those enterprise funds. The enterprise fund that municipal utilities oversees, the transfer to the general fund is not 8%. It's set by negotiation between the city council and the municipal utilities. And that negotiation hasn't happened yet. So I will just tell you what is assumed in the budget. And I have assumed that we split essentially the amount of money that is transferred from the general fund to the municipal utilities funds for hydrant rental and for street light rentals. That's about $800,000, and so I've put $400,000 in the budget. So hopefully that negotiation will happen soon, and if the transfer amount is less than that, we'll have to adjust the budget. If it's more, likewise, we'll have to adjust the budget. But that's what the assumption was. I had to put something in there. The total impact could be anywhere from $945,000 if we did all of these things, up to almost $3 million. So minimum success in each of those different options would give us much more comfort in our general fund. The Park and Rec Fund is the next fund I'm going to go over. The revenues we're expecting to decrease just a tiny little bit. We're increasing the transfer. Well, we increased it last year, sorry. The transfer from the BBB sales tax went down in my projection for 2021 because that whole fund is expected to be less next year, and I will get to that in a later slide, but I just want to say here the transfer to the Park and Rec Fund is going down by $150,000 because of that expected loss of revenue. The golf membership fees are increasing, the aquatic center fees are increasing, and the zoo user fees are increasing. So overall there's a slight decrease. Park and Rec personnel is just a slight decrease, and that's because we didn't fill, the assistant director assumed the role of the director when the director retired, and we did not backfill that position. There was a massive reorganization in the Park and Rec department, and it isn't done yet, but we've made some very significant changes, and we're starting to see some benefit from doing that, and we expect to keep moving with that. The Park and Rec operating is basically the same. There's just a tiny increase, couple percent, mostly due to some minor things. Nothing significant though. Park and Rec capital outlay is increased significantly because of a few things cumulatively. There's not one thing that's huge other than we have budgeted for an ice resurfacer, and that's something that could make it another year. If we need to, we could carve that easily out of the budget. We were thinking we're going to build the ice arena in 2021, and then we'd want a new resurfacer if we do that. However, if we don't do that in 2021, we can probably wait to buy the resurfacer. But everything else, you can see those are $5,000 to $10,000 changes. They're not significant at all. So in summary, the Park and Rec is seeing there's a little bit of increase in expenditure that we would be drawing upon our unreserved fund balance to balance it out. But generally, we tend to see greater revenues than we project and lesser expenditures, so that number will probably work its way out to be a little bit less than that in the end. There were no personnel or capital outlay requests in the park budget that weren't met. The BBB, or the Bed, Board, and Booze fund, you can see here, we expect a significant decrease in the revenue. And so there's also a significant decrease in the expenditures. And we have external organizations which receive benefit from the BBB fund, namely the Chamber of Commerce and the Convention and Visitors Bureau. And there are internal operations, the Park and Rec and our event center. Those are the things that this BBB fund supports. So what I did to adjust the expenditures out of the to match the revenue that we expect is to take an equal cut out of the internal versus the external, so that they're cut equally. And if our revenues were to be higher than we expect, I would want to share those revenues back in proportion. What I'd like to do is about a quarter of the way through the year, we'll take a look at how those BBB funds are sitting, and if we're seeing some increases, we might want to make an increase, because that's really hurting each one of those. The Park and Rec department really could use some more money coming its way, as could the event center. Likewise, the CVB and the Chamber of Commerce could really use the extra money. The Prairie Lakes Wellness Center is holding its own. So we're not expecting any significant changes in the revenues, and we're also not expecting any significant changes in the expenditures. And it pretty well balances itself out. You can see there's, it looks like it jumped up a lot, but those are tiny numbers, $3,000, $2,000. So there's an increase in the operating of $8,700. The capital outlay is just a slight increase for some equipment, and we're changing the tile out and adding a piece of equipment in there. So in summary, this one really balances well. There's actually a little bit of revenue there that we can set aside for future needed improvements. Casualty Reserve Fund is something we don't have much control over. We have to do this. No changes. The Capital Improvement Fund revenues are expected to decline. Again, this is the second penny sales tax, so we expect that the revenue will be less. So the revenue comes from sales tax, also comes from grants and funds from the state and interest earned. So all of these things are going down a little bit next year. The expenditures, however, are going up, and we do have a reserve fund that this is a pretty healthy fund that enables us to do this. But these are purchases which were proposed, and some of them coming from our long-term plans. So things that we knew were coming down the pike. But this is a fund that, we have a lot of flexibility how we spend this money. The increases this year, street improvements, $3 million, the storm sewer and flood control, $150,000, rec center, recreation facility improvements includes new trail and a new park. The industrial park is a slight increase, and some debt service is always a big chunk of this, and transfers out, and this is going to the airport, $5 million. So there aren't any personnel requests in the second penny sales tax capital improvement fund. I did cut out the sump pump collection system budget just because I was kind of desperately looking for anything that we could do away with. If our revenues dramatically increase, we might want to put that back. So in summary, we are taking money, we have money that we've been outlaying to build some of these things, but we are seeing a dip, and this fund can handle it. The E911 fund, the revenues are going up a little bit, and that's because the expenses are going up, and so there's an increased transfer from the capital improvement fund just because that's a legal way to pay for E911. But that's one of those things that we wish we could share more with some of the people that we provide E911 services for, but those fees are set. E911 personnel is going up just because of increased wages. We didn't add anybody. The operating costs are not expected to change significantly, and the capital outlay is actually going down. These are small numbers though, so there's a little bit coming out of the fund balance. Library fines fund, the revenues are not expecting any significant change. The operating expenses coming out of the library fines fund is increasing because the internet service provider costs are going up. It's the most significant change. The capital outlay, though, is pretty much the same, just a very slight uptick of $1,000. So in summary, the library fines is spending more than it's bringing in, and this is not sustainable. So the library would like to pay for some of the stuff out of the general fund, but there's just not a lot of room in the general fund this year. So they didn't make any personnel requests or capital outlay requests from the library fines fund. The urban renewal fund is expected to see some taxes, so jumping way up because we have an urban renewal tax that we're collecting, and you can see it's shy of $40,000. So this is not a big fund. It's a pretty small fund, even though it looks like a giant jump there. The Upper Big Sioux River Watershed Project is not seeing any significant changes in revenue or in personnel or in operating expenses. In summary, that fund is okay. The TIF funds, we don't have a lot of control once these are done, but we'll just go through them. You see Hanton Industrial Park. Blue is revenue. Pink is expense. So blue one's looking good for the Hanton Industrial Park. Mallard Point is, it's in the red. Not much you can do about that. TIF 5 is First Avenue North Extension. We're finally seeing a little bit of revenue there. That one's been hurting, TIF number 5, because we made the expenditure in the year 2007, and there just wasn't much out there for a long, long time. But now we're starting to see some money come back. TIF 6 was Pheasant Ridge, and that's a good, healthy one. This is all we have for the TIFs. Next year we'll maybe see some more on there because we passed some new TIFs. The general obligation bonds are revenues and expenditures are pretty even. And the capital projects fund is the fund that we use to build the Prairie Lakes Wellness Center, the softball complex, and the ice arena. And if we were to, obviously the expenditures are zero because we didn't put that in the budget. We know we'll most likely need to bond to build that, and that's a conversation that isn't happening tonight, but it is a conversation the council is working on, and they've taken a little rest from it with the COVID situation until we have more certainty in our economy. But we do expect to bring that back up and have that conversation very soon. Okay, these are our enterprise funds that we're going to launch into here. The wastewater revenues, we're expecting to increase our fees, and so we will be increasing our revenue. So we're also getting a loan to build some things, so we'll have some revenue there. Personnel didn't change. Our enterprise fund personnel has not changed for years and years. We've been doing the work with the same number of people year after year. The work doesn't change a lot, and so the demand on staff doesn't really change a lot either. But there have been increases in technology that have made them more efficient at their work, so that's really good. No significant changes in the personnel, and the operating budget is just a very slight, less than 1% decrease. The capital outlay this year, or 2021, is expected to be less than it was for 2020, just basically because of the type of equipment that we're purchasing. And this is a flush fund, not a problem here. Solid waste fund, same kind of a story. We have a slight increase. We're expecting to increase our fees, and so we'll have a little bit more revenue, but not huge. The personnel is not changing, so the only change here would be the personnel salaries. If someone retires and they're replaced with someone who's just starting out, there's an actual decrease in the budget. The operating budget is going up because of, these are not big numbers, but there's an increase of $300,000, and Heath will have to answer that. If you have questions about that later, I'm not sure what the specific was there. The solid waste capital outlay is less this year, or this coming year, than it was for 2020, so that's a slight decrease. And in summary, it's just a pretty well balanced fund. Airport fund is last. This is our last enterprise fund, and there's a giant increase because we're building an airport terminal. They're seeing a transfer from the capital improvement fund of about $5 million and about $15 million from the federal government to build our new airport terminal. The city will be paying all the bills as they come for building this terminal, and then being reimbursed for our expenses. So we might have times when we're spending more than $5 million, and that cash flow is all ironed out. Does create some issues for us, though. Stifles the conversation about what are we going to do with our extra money when we have big ticket items like that. Airport personnel is not expected to change. The operating budget is going up just ever so slightly with an increase in consulting services. Capital outlay is because of the purchase of the new terminal and some other things that go along with that. So, in summary, it looks like it's in the red a little bit, and we'll be okay with that. It's largely due to the airport terminal. So that's my presentation, and I think if the council would like to go back to the individual departments, the department heads are all here, and we can talk about those individual budgets. I'm going to go back to the slide that shows the various different changes in summary, and then you can pick them out as you like. Sorry, I should do this a different way. Here we go. Who wants to start? Councilman Vilhauer.
I guess that was a very, very rapid overview, obviously, and I guess we had a number of questions. I went through the budget book, but I guess the one that I'm going to address to our finance officer, Kristen, you know, I cannot be concerned. I realize that we're counting on some CARES Act funding to make up the shortfall. I know we budget conservatively, but I do want to ask a question. As I understand it, going through the 2019 CAFR that just got done here not too long ago, we've got about $6.2 million of unassigned general fund dollars. Is that correct figure, Kristen?
That's correct.
Okay. What I know there's a rule of thumb out there that you like to keep, or we should be keeping on hand, X number of months of general fund expenditures in our I'm sorry, X number of months in our reserves based upon our general fund expenditures. What is that rule of thumb?
We usually strive to keep 3 months of our operating expense. I push it more towards about the 4 month, but 3 months is the general kind of rule of thumb. 3 months of operating.
Okay. Because looking at roughly $21 million of general fund expenditures, that works out about $1.7 million in round numbers per month. So we do have that, whether it's 3 or 4, we do have that on hand in our general fund reserves, at least based upon 2019 numbers. And I guess if we assume 2020 is roughly, you know, we don't know what those numbers are going to look like for 2020, but I guess I'm still hoping that we've got roughly a $6 million unassigned general fund balance going into 2021. Is that a, you know, ballpark figure that you're comfortable with, Kristen?
Yep. When I project out using the 2020 anticipated revenues and expenditures, as well as what's in the budget, the mayor's budget for 2021, I am looking at, we'll probably end up around the 5 million of unassigned. So a little bit of a decrease. I will say that the potential for the CARES Act is really what's kind of continuing to make it strong. But yeah, I would say that even with the current budget as it is, for 2021, we should end up probably around the 5 million.
Okay. Well, now we're starting to cut it pretty tight based upon 3 or 4 months worth. So I guess I'm okay heading into 2021, but obviously these numbers can continue. I went back and looked at general fund unassigned balances going back the last 10 years, and they've been dipping slowly, and all of a sudden we could be taking a big chunk out of them here within this year, next year, that within a couple of years that general fund balance could be zero. And that's a scary situation I don't want to find us in.
That is correct. Like I said, I think our kind of our saving grace right now for this year will be that CARES Act funding. I know we were awarded potentially up to the 5 million mark, a little over 5 million. So far off of my estimates, what I can confirm we can probably come close to getting is around the 4. That is what I put in. I didn't want to anticipate getting the full 5, just because I don't know if we will be able to. So it is conservative doing what we could receive for the CARES Act funding.
That was the reason I put that slide in there about what tools we have. And we need to take this very seriously. As I said, it's not sustainable what we're doing. We need to continue to pursue every avenue that we have in order to remain healthy. Who else wants to ask? Glenn, did you want to run right into another question?
Just a comment. I can't help compare what we've got for reserves sitting there versus our colleagues over at the utilities department, and they're always concerned about maintaining their reserves, and they are a whole lot more flush with reserves than we ever have been, and I think that transfer amount is something that we do definitely need to negotiate, and negotiate a little more strongly than maybe we have in recent years.
Right, the transfer from the enterprise funds is a significant part of the general government fund. And the gas, water, and electric do not transfer anywhere near the rate that the sewer and solid waste funds transfer to the general fund. Who's next? Can't believe you don't have any questions. Councilman Lallam.
Are we going by department now, or
Well, you can do whatever you want.
I don't know if I'd go that far. I mean,
Which department would you like to go by?
I'd like to just briefly touch on fire rescue, if that would
Okay.
be okay. It looks
You guys
like they,
wanna-
if you gentlemen would like to come up, looks like they were requesting 2 people. I did have a conversation with the chief and Don as well about some temporary help that's expiring, and then they have a gentleman that is going to be going, I believe, Afghanistan or Cuba. Cuba. So that they would be looking to fill that again.
Right.
It didn't make a lot of sense to me to have a 4 or 5 month window where we get rid of somebody and then have to hire someone back again.
No, and I did speak with these guys after I had already prepared my budget, and I asked them to make their case to the council. I completely support it. Had I known about it before I did the budget, I would have included it. But essentially, we have to, it's a lot of training to be a firefighter. One of you, we have Chief Kranz and Assistant Chief Rowland here. You can probably describe it better than I can.
Sure. You want to take the first part of it?
Yeah, well, so basically we have one of our staff members that is already on deployment currently right now. And he basically got promoted into another position, which in turn had him be reassigned to another city in the state of South Dakota. And basically he would have been going to South Africa and being gone until roughly next year at this time. Now he's going to be reassigned and coming back to work in November. We do have a temporary full-time employee right now, and that individual would then be out of a position. And so basically what we want to do is keep this individual on until July of next year, because in this reassignment that he has with, he's going to be reassigned to Rapid City, he will be redeployed to Cuba, and he'll be out another 9 to 12 months. So with that said, our goal is to continue to keep this individual on because of the fact that, like the mayor just alluded to, and Adam, with the cost of training and as such, this individual is already a firefighter paramedic. He's gone through almost a year and a half of training, and would be less efficient for us in general, so to speak, considering we'd have to hire another person after 8 months. So after visiting with the mayor and the chief, we decided to throw some more money into our clerical expenditure side of it.
And the only other thing I'd like to add about that is the fact that he went to school here in Watertown at Lake Area Technical College through the firefighter paramedic program. He is local. He has been with us for just a little over a year now. Has went through a schooling. He went through our internship part-time program. He's a very valuable employee. He does have a lot of training, and then he went into the part-time and then into temporary, and is a very valuable asset for us. And we sure like to do everything we could to try and keep that temporary position.
Yeah, one of the things that when chief and the assistant chief reached out to me, and one of the things that I thought of is just to the training time is one thing, the amount of work that they put in is another, but also to go through that process, hiring a new person, hiring a temp person's got to be one of the hardest items that you can do, is to find somebody and then have them up and running right away. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to, have someone off for essentially a few months and then have to try to find somebody again. If they get assigned into another department or they go to another city, it seems like we're, cutting off our nose to spite our face type deal. So.
And I applaud the mayor. We talked about options. We could have did a supplement at the end of the calendar year of 2021 for the basically, if we come to council this fall and got approval to continue this individual on, but we thought it was a much better, efficient way to move it into this year's budget of 2021 immediately. So it was very of a positive opportunity for us. Again, we also asked for 2 full-time people for the next calendar year. And really, we understand that, like the mayor shared in our budget here, it's just so difficult to add this into our general fund. We understand that, but that said, we still are on the present time frame. We know that these 2 individuals would help with a lot of our overtime needs that we continue to have, and we know that would reduce that. We also understand that going forward that this will be something that we would look at in a later date to continue that. But these 2 individuals would be what we need now going into today, tomorrow. It isn't anything that we plan for the East Fire Station. So I know that's in our long-term planning budget that you guys are going to get to see, but that would be something that we identified in our SWOT, our strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats plan back in 2012, 2013. And again, in 18, 19, we redid it. It still showed that our daytime peak hours are still something very high. And we did share that with a few of our council members as well. So anything to add on that, Chief?
No, we fully understand the budget process, the revenues that and the concerns we have moving forward, and we just wanted to let everyone know that it is a need, the 2 personnel on a long-term basis, and we're very comfortable with looking at that at a later point when revenues and things get back into line at a later date, whenever that might be. But just wanted to let you know that it is a need for us, and we would be happy to for your consideration on the temporary employee in the meantime. So
What would the amount be?
On that temporary employee, I believe in that 40 to 47,000 range, 42 to 47,000. Kristen might have a better understanding of that number for us.
I did have an opportunity to do a quick run of the numbers, and I feel comfortable around the 47 to 50,000. A lot of it'll just depend on if there's any change to the health insurance benefit. But if everything would remain the same, I would say around the 47 to 50 would be sufficient.
Okay, you have another question? Oh, Councilwoman Manti, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Couple things. One is I see the value of this temporary position. I just wanted to ask Chief and Assistant Chief, how long have you guys been carrying over this need for these extra daytime positions now? Seems like through the budget process, I've heard this several times.
yes, basically we started this long-term plan of the additional 2 in 2017 budget going through today, and we've broken that down in the past. We've shown the need for it on the 2 employees, which would give us an additional 2 employees that would add to the 2 that we already have for 40-hour staff, which would put an extra ambulance on call 12 hours a day, 7 days a week to help combat our high call volume times. They're basically EMS assignment. They'd be EMTs. So we've been working on that one way or another since 2017, and again it was identified in the SWOT. So yes, it's been about that long. So
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Councilman Holeen?
Thank you. I would just like to voice my approval for the temporary position. The larger conversation of 2 additional full-time employees is a conversation I think we need to push off to a better year of budget. But as for right now, I can voice my approval or my support for the temporary position.
Would you like to make that motion?
I would be okay making that motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Holeen,
Second.
second by Lallam. Any further discussion on this? All right, we'll just go ahead and vote on that. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Beth and Reed, you both still have your hands up. Beth, did you have another question? No.
Not really another question. It just kind of happened real fast. I wanted to clarify when we could have the discussion again. Are we talking about the discussion with the firefighters? I'm really big on the safety of a community, also as the attractiveness of a community. So I think the growth and development of a community follow hand in hand with public safety. So I just was curious, are we most comfortable waiting for that conversation, as Reed said, until we actually have a better budget or a higher budget number? Are we willing to look at that as an interim thing? Should financial changes happen? I guess I just, you know, when you hear about the same position being carried forward from 2017, it makes me think if the need was there 3 years ago, what's the need going to be like in another year from now? I guess that's just something I wanted to bring up as for consideration, not necessarily for action, but just to have that discussion and bring that out there.
All right, thank you. So that would be up to the council. If you want to make that motion tonight, you can do that to add that to the budget. I just felt that we're so in the red that, and that's why, not that there isn't a need. Clearly, there's a need, and it's just, I don't think it's responsible to be this far into the red. I'm not comfortable going any further, but if the council is, you certainly have the ability to do that.
I wasn't necessarily suggesting that we approve it tonight. I was hoping that we could not delay the conversation even further. If this is the only time to have that conversation, that's fine. I just was curious as to what was the feeling out there with other council members. I can't see very well about how people are reacting and their facial expressions and things like that. So I guess I need to have a little more information about that whole thing.
Poker faces, every one of them. Kristen has her
Okay.
hand up. Finance officer? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to let Beth know too, part of the conversation, I think, with the additional staff for the fire and ambulance may take a little bit of discussion too with the long-term budget, and that'll happen in October. There is still that East Side Fire Station conversation that needs to be had, and a lot of personnel would need to be discussed before that piece is also discussed. So I'm not saying which way the council should go, but just so you know, I think part of the long-term capital discussion, we'll actually have a little bit of a discussion piece of personnel needs as well. So just for information.
Right,
Yes.
and I guess that's the answer I was looking for, is if we can have this discussion in October at a very appropriate segue or whatever, that's good. I think we need to keep the conversation going.
Yep, thank you. And I want to reiterate that we do have to pass a budget, and we do have a deadline on that. But that doesn't mean it has to remain exactly as you passed it. You can always modify it at any time. Councilman Lallam?
I have to say there's a bit of irony in the room when we just have our sales tax come in at 17% higher, and then we're talking about how much lower it is. But I mean, to be fiscally responsible, we have to make sure that, you know, it's sustainable, whatever our growth or negativity is on that. But to look at it, you know, now I think it is irresponsible. We're simply trying to put some sort of a dollar amount to it and hopefully stick to that as much as possible.
Right, that's 17%, amazing. And I mean, if you're out there and you're listening, that's a testament to what happens when people don't travel to spend their money and they just spend it in their hometown. Shop local, it makes a gigantic difference. And we did have a lot of tournaments in town and things going on here that weren't going on elsewhere. That helped too. So we need to keep both of those things in mind. Tournaments pay off and shop local really pays off.
Yeah, but I mean, those are great things, but we have to look and see what, as we get through the next few months, as to
Yeah. Is it-
if that is a one-off
is it
or
a
is this
trend? Right.
hopefully it's a trend that's going the same direction. I mean, it really would prove that the shopping here and spending your money locally is gonna be the most beneficial, obviously. But let's, see how we get through the next couple months to see if that's the trend that we're going towards, or maybe it is just a one-off from, you know, a massive influx of people for 1 month.
Right. Thank you. Kristen, did you want to say something?
No, sorry,
No,
put
that's
my
all
hand down.
Okay, Councilman Albertson.
You know, in that line, I'm wondering if we're missing the boat a little bit by taking the 17% away from the BBB. You know, they really struggled to try to get people to come into Watertown. And I'm just kind of thinking myself that it would be good if we would put money back into that account, just because they are kind of the one that can keep our community going, whether it's tournaments. We have several tournaments coming up in the school system this year, state tournaments, and there maybe are other things that we have some really nice facilities, and I would hate to see those people get stymied because we don't have the money for them to go out and do what they should be doing. So I'm thinking I might recommend putting money into their account rather than taking away from them.
So I wasn't taking away, I was meeting out the expected revenue from the BBB tax. If you're suggesting transferring money from the general fund, tax fund to the BBB tax fund,
Yes.
as opposed to hiring a staff member that's desperately needed, that's a pretty serious conversation. And Councilman Roby?
I'll just chime in as the liaison for the CVB. I appreciate Alderman's comments. The CVB is pretty tightly tied to the BBB tax. And what I've heard is if that tax overperforms, there will be opportunities for the CVB
Yes.
to come back and do some things. I think they've done a lot of good things the last couple of years to promote Watertown. So I'm very supportive of that organization in general. I think what I didn't want to see the budget get cut, but I understand why it did. And I feel that if that BBB performs, I know they'll be back, and I'll very likely support it because of what they do.
Absolutely, thank you, and I'll reiterate what I said before. I think we should monitor that very closely, and if the revenues are coming in higher, we should put those monies back where they would have gone. Who else has a question or comment? Councilman Vilhauer?
I guess I'd like to direct this to our Public Works Director. You know, as far as the engineering side of it, the street department side of it, I mean, we hear that time and time again as far as our street maintenance needs. I know engineering has been short-staffed for quite some time. We hear. So I guess any comments that you might have, Heath. I guess I'll just kind of give you free rein as far as what you might have to comment on.
Thank you for that, Councilman Vilhauer. We did make one new FTE request in the 2021 budget. For a engineer 2. What an engineer 2 is a fairly new graduate engineer with an EIT, an engineering training license. And the reason I had made that specific request was based simply on the workload and observing how we've been able to or not been able to keep up with the demands these first 2 years of me being with the city. We've had a lot of discussions on the development side of things and the role that engineering office plays in the development of public improvements that are installed by developers throughout the community. And those discussions have not only been internally on staff side and with elected officials, but also on the other side of the discussions from the developer side, who have, I think, unilaterally suggested that we have a larger presence in the field during construction of these development projects, particularly when they're installing public utilities and public infrastructure. And that is just simply something that we have not had a presence of for a good number of years. I can't speak to when the last time we would have had a good presence of engineering staff on those projects, but certainly not the 2 years I've been here, simply because we just don't have the manpower to do that. So that request came in part because of those needs to have a better presence, to inspect the construction of those public improvements. That helps ensure a lot of things. It helps the developer I've heard developers say this to us, we want you on our projects. We want to make sure that our contractors are doing this work to meet your specifications. They do not want to come back and have to reconstruct things later on because they're prematurely failing. They like to have us plugged in, and so that we can help lead them along and make sure the process is followed appropriately. And then, of course, on the other side of the discussion, we, as the council, I've heard from several of you, we as a staff would love to have a better presence out there on those projects to ensure that the public improvements that we're accepting for our perpetual ownership and maintenance are in fact constructed to meet the specifications that they're approved to be built to. And that's the gap here that I'm trying to close with this position. That's one of the gaps I'm trying to close. The other side of the coin, so that's the development side. The other function of the engineering office is primarily the capital improvement plan and the capital construction projects that we administer that are internal. You know, the street reconstruction projects, the new city facilities, the projects that engineering partners with our other departments on, like the pathway projects, the rec trails, the other facilities like the new fire station, the airport terminal, the zoo animal care building that's going on right now. Long story there is, in a nutshell, we've got roughly 30 projects this year alone that we're managing amongst currently just 3 staff. Now normally we'd have 5, including myself, but we have 2 vacancies. So there's currently 3 staff managing those 30 projects. And what this new position would help do, even when we're full staffed, is not only be able to focus on the development side, but on an as-needed basis help out with the project management duties of these capital projects. Some of these capital projects are pretty extensive. We have a $9 million terminal being built and then a subsequent $9 million phase of civil site improvements after that. We've got a $2 million animal care building. I think it was $2 million if I remember right. So multi-million dollars where having the appropriate education and training to be a project manager on those higher level projects is also critical for the city as well. And that's again where that engineer 2 demand, or ask I should say, come into play. And so I think that if we get that engineer 2 in, it helps us out on both sides of the coin, the development side and the capital improvement side, and it helps carry that workload appropriately to be spread more evenly amongst staff, and but also gets us as a presence in the field on those development projects. Those are the key targets. That was a long discussion on the engineering because that was really the only ask for new FTE. Street side of things, though, Glenn, you also touched on that. I've been in communications with Rob. Rob's online here. You know, our street network has not at all diminished over the years, as we all know. It's only expanded over the years, and we continue to operate a very tight ship, a very tight crew of street operators out there that Rob's doing a great job with. But we do know that, you know, our street network only continues to expand year after year. And I don't have any technical analysis of how much that street network has grown over the last several years to justify a new position, and we weren't necessarily doing that for this next fiscal year. But it is something to, you know, keep in the back of our minds that there will be a point that we'll be at a breaking point needing additional staff out there at the street facility.
Heath, what would be the cost of that engineer 2 position if we were to add that?
I believe that Kristen helped me out with some numbers there I saw on the slide that would come in around that mid-90s, 90,000.
Including benefits.
Which includes benefits, okay. Yes.
Is there an available pool out there if we were to advertise for that position? Is that a spot that we would be able to fill fairly readily here in Watertown?
Well, I can say that our engineer 1 that we hired last year, it did take a good several months of advertising and drew a very limited pool. We were very, very lucky with the candidate that we ended up hiring in Marcy. She's been an outstanding job for us as a project manager and as an engineer 1. It's hard to tell. I know that that's a very demanding field right now to get EITs. College grads coming out of college are getting swiped up left and right by private and public sectors. So it's hard to say. I think it will take some challenging advertising and to
Worth
get it
a
out
try.
there. It is definitely worth it.
We'd definitely try. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I might have a follow-up. I'll
Okay, Jason?
That salary that you mentioned, Heath, is that salary coming right out of a university, or is that with some experience?
That would be based right out of a university. The salary without benefits is usually somewhere around 60 grand, maybe a little north of 60,000. An EIT, you might pay a little bit more than that, and so I think that's probably about right out of school, maybe with a couple years experience.
Councilman Vilhar?
follow-up. Heath, with that extra or additional presence in the field that you're referring to, would that help eliminate or alleviate some of the issues that we've seen? I think of the Northridge Drive roads that failed prematurely. I mean, would this help to mitigate some of those problems out there? If I'm understanding you correctly.
Yes, that would be the goal. The answer to that question is twofold. One, on the design review side, we're doing what we can and reviewing plans and approving them, and that's where we have the strongest presence in the development process. Is we are reviewing the plans and making recommendations for design modifications to meet our standards. But this position will help amplify that all the more on the design side, the design review and permitting. Now, in the field, you're exactly right. Without having an engineer out there to do field inspection to see what kind of compaction effort is going into the subgrade before the base course is laid, and subsequently the same for the base course before the asphalt is placed, that's where we tend to run into trench settlement issues, utility, backfill, and compaction issues, pavement failure issues, and things of that nature. But there's also things you can see in the field, too, that you can't see on paper when you're reviewing these designs. And presence of groundwater, for example, is one of them. And you might find that there's issues in the field during construction that you may have to have a design modification to help substantiate that road section, like adding fabric or adding edge drain or things like that that'll get the water out and away from the pavement.
Is this something that I can hear the benefit from the city side of it, but from the developer side, is it adding one more hurdle to them, or is it actually expediting or alleviating some issues for them?
Yeah, and so the example I stated previous with the developer having mentioned them wanting us in the field, it's more of an assurance to them in that regard that they're not going to be caught by surprise later on. And now, us being present in the field doesn't guarantee that their contractor is building everything 100% accurately, but it definitely increases the probability of the construction being carried out to the plans and specifications.
Now, I mean, wouldn't most developers have their own engineer on site for a lot of this as well? Are we duplicating some effort there, or is that not the way the process works?
It depends on the community and how well of a program you've got in place. And
we do require the design engineer to certify that the construction meets the specifications. So yes, it's on them, but they can't be everywhere all the time either, and it doesn't hurt for us to be able to drop in.
So while they do certify that, it's not required that they're out there a minimum number of hours or for certain phases of construction. So it ends up being a hit or miss, and we just stand on their certification.
Councilman Rademski?
Heath, in your estimation, would the addition of this person help to alleviate some of these significant change orders that the council seems to get blindsided by sometimes, and some of these can be quite spendy?
You know, that's another great point, Councilman Rademski. When it comes to project management, I don't say this at all to diminish any level of the staff, but the higher qualified staff you have on projects to manage them and the adequate amount of staff that you have to manage the sheer number of projects all help to reduce things like change orders, and it's particularly substantial ones. When you have the staff in place to carry that workload, things are a lot less likely to slip through the cracks, is what it boils down to. And you know, like I said, we're doing the darndest we can with the staff we have now. I would not diminish the quality of staff we have at all. They're doing a heck of a job for the workload that we've got. And so Justin and Marcy up there in engineering are running rampant and spread very thin and doing a great job with what we've got to work with. So,
Yeah, Councilman Albertson?
Heath, question, you have 2 openings. Is there any chance that one of these positions could be helped with, or that you could use an engineer in one of those 2 positions to, I don't know, I'm just trying to get the position, and you have 2 openings, so I'm just wondering if that's an option at all.
yeah, no, that's a great question, Councilman Albertson. The 2 openings that we do have were engineering technician positions, which also help with these project management duties that we perform. And they are both filled. One applicant starts next Monday, the 17th, as a licensed surveyor, which we modified that position and created a surveyor role, which will be a great asset for us to have. And then the subsequent one will be filled on the 24th, the week after, as an engineering technician. And again, it's just, those positions will continue to be utilized just like our 2 previous engineering techs were. But even with their presence, plugging in an engineer too would really help accomplish the goals of what we're trying to accomplish.
Heath, question, would this person sort of be dedicated to that then? To working with the developers and these other big projects? That would be their focus of that position?
Yeah, I like that concept to have staff dedicated to certain functions like this. With having a smaller staff in general, generally speaking, I also like to have some cross-training and availability for others to do that. So the answer to your question is yes, I'd like to have them focused to some extent, but also, you know, Marcy and Justin would still be focused and trained on the ability to do that if needed. So while we like to assign specific tasks, we also like to have that redundancy when the need arises.
Councilman Lallam?
Heath, as I've sat here for 3 years and sat through budget meetings for the 4th time now, I believe. One of the things that we have come across and we've had to deal with is, frankly, failures on either, you know, the building of roads or something that's done either by design or by just, you know, nature in general. I look at all the money that we put out as a community to fix problems, one way or another. If this is a way that we can get that to, frankly, to fix those problems before they actually start, it doesn't make sense to me not to take that position and fill that, or attempt to fill it at least. And one of the things that I've talked with several developers and several of the people in the community is just tell us what to do. You know, have someone there that they can help us understand it or help us go through a process better, make sure that we're, you know, following up on it. That's one of the things I know that myself and at least a couple other council members have asked is, you know, can we get someone out there to just check as they're going through the process? You know, it's yeah, we take the design, we hopefully they do it correctly, and we stand, like you said, stand on their merits that they signed off on it and it's done correctly. You know, eyes in the field sometimes are the best thing that we could possibly do. My recommendation would be to, you know, advertise for that position.
Wow. That's great. Got a hand over here. Someone was.
Mayor, thank you.
Councilman Bueller.
You know, I know that we do this. I mean, it's not like we haven't done it or we've never done it. It's just that we would have more of an opportunity to do more of it. But I just don't want people to believe that in the past we haven't had folks go out, take core samples, look at compaction, look at grading, all those kind of things that need to be inspected. But this would obviously give us a little more ability for more volume and probably more detail. But I just want it to be clear that this is not something the engineering departments have not done. So.
Yeah.
Right, they're just spread thin.
Yeah, and to Councilman's point, I didn't mean that as a dig against our staff at all. It's just when you don't have time and you don't have enough people, it is hard to maintain that level of commitment all the way through, so.
Yeah, no, and I thank you for that comment, Councilman Bueller. My comments didn't mean to allude that this is nothing we've been doing over the last several years. It's just we haven't been doing enough of it because of the workload being spread so thin with the staff that we have available.
Well, and historically speaking, some of these subdivisions are 20-plus years old. I mean, it's not like this is a 1 year or 2 year problem. I mean, this is something that probably has community, we just need to be better suited for.
Right. Councilman Vilhauer?
I feel bad sitting here looking at Doug Kranz and Don Rowland in the background there, but I would move that we do add that position, advertise now with the goal of hopefully having that position on by 1/1/21. This is going on my 6th year in the council, and year after year, month after month, we hear engineering issues, we hear developer concerns. What's the holdup? Why aren't things getting done? And then we got problems after the fact. And if this will help mitigate some of those issues, I think it's money well spent on our part if we were to add that additional person in your staff. So I would make that as a motion.
I'd second it.
Oh, okay, we have a motion by Vilhauer and a second by Lallam. Any further discussion on this? Councilman Roby?
In a tight budget year, this is one I was interested in because I do believe there's an ROI element on this one. And Glenn alluded to some of the things I've been thinking about as we've had so many issues where the expense of not having it done right the first time always seems to fall back on the city. And this is a tight budget year, but I came in leaning towards this one for that return on investment view.
Right.
Mayor?
Anyone else? Councilman
If I
Bueller?
might, and I'll also add, I think this is important as well for all the other projects, like you had mentioned, all the civil projects the city is working with in the next year or two too. So I think that really adds to the need.
Thank you. Kristen, Finance Officer, has her hand up.
I do. Just because the current motion that's on is kind of a little bit not really 2021 budget. Essentially, if the council is wishing to allow for advertising, my recommendation is it could potentially take till January, but we could get somebody next month, and then you don't have the budget. So I guess for me, if the council really is in favor of and I almost feel like we need to take action on that at a council meeting to create that position now, with the fact that it could be filled before January, because the normal budget process would be this would come forth during that budget ordinance in September. So that's just kind of my recommendation. It's kind of, I'm hearing advertise now, but it's a 2021, and sometimes it doesn't work that way with hiring.
Well, and I think that's, he said to be able to have somebody right away at the beginning of the new year. So the budget for the position would be for 2021, and then we'd figure out the advertising before that. Am I right?
But that was my, I realized my motion was probably somewhat confusing or contradictory there. I guess I don't want to necessarily have to wait until 2021. If we can advertise and somebody comes out of the woodwork within a few weeks, I'd say great. Let's latch on to that person. So I'm not sure, Kristen, what you're saying now. Should we act on this at a separate item in an upcoming council meeting, or I guess I'm asking out of ignorance or how we proceed.
Are we realistically putting it into the budget for 2021? I mean, that's what we're doing
The
here.
motion was to put it in the budget for 2021, but. Go ahead, Councilman Roby.
Thank you. I think it's two steps. If we approve it for that budget, fine. Then we come back in a regular council meeting if you want to move it in this year.
Right.
And
Yeah.
create the position.
That's fine with me.
Yeah, and then we do a budget supplement if we hired them
We
this
would-
year.
Yep.
Okay.
Can somebody clarify that for me now?
The motion
What's
was
that?
to increase the budget to allow for an engineer 2 in the 2021 budget. So that will be what this motion is. And then we'll take some further actions that don't have to do with the budget right now. Am I getting that right? Okay, any other further discussion?
Are you clear on what we're trying to tell you, Heath?
I am, and I think that my understanding is the goal would be to advertise as soon as we can, and then fill it come January 1st. Unless we get an applicant prior, then we'll come back to the council and see if you want to plug it in yet in 20.
Yeah. Any other comments before we take a vote? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. All right. Very good. All right, who else has a question or a comment? Councilman Vilhauer.
Is Terry Kelly on the line?
Yes, he is.
You know, I know I've had this conversation before, and I guess as supervisor, I'll direct it towards you, TK. You know, I'm a huge supporter of the zoo. I think, you know, my actions over the years have proven that out to the Zoo Society and the staff. But looking at that budget compared, you know, it's a $700,000 drain in our city budget as far as what we take in versus what we pay out. And I realize that we're not measuring other revenues that come in relative to, you know, sales tax dollars, you know, business activity in the community. I realize we're not measuring that, really have no way of measuring that. But I guess just any comments that you may be able to make, TK, relative to conversations that you've had with zoo staff concerning, because it is by far our biggest negative factor in the Park and Rec Department budget. And so I guess I'll turn over to you, TK, with you know, how I've sort of asked the question.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. You know, as you're asking the question, Glenn, I had to pause and think about how to answer that. It's obviously we have a beautiful zoo, definitely a destination zoo, and it is a strain. You know, we're pushing about $750,000 subsidy, and really, I think we need to look back as a board and a council. You know, is that the direction we want to go? To have the zoo that we have is a tax burden. It's expensive. The price point to charge revenues won't get us close to a profitability. You know, I go back and I look at things also quality of life. You know, we offer bike trails, we have park system that really have no revenues. So we just got to look at it as the cost to provide those services to our community and provide that economic impact as well. So I have actually had conversations with Kristen here during this budget process. Kind of behind the scenes, there was a lot of capital coming up in the future that I really truly put on hold. I think right now, as we've seen through AZA accreditation, we've got the zoo right now we can afford. New exhibits, new things, we can't sustain that. And that's why we put a halt on, here's where we're at, this is the zoo we have to offer. And it comes with a hefty price tag. So we are trying as best we can to find efficiencies, increase revenues. You know, we're bumping up another 55, 60,000 this year. You know, it doesn't close that gap, but it's a step in the right direction to start looking at ways to save those expenses, increase the revenues to truly close the gap on what that subsidy is from the city tax dollars. So, but we have a great zoo. It's definitely a staple of our department, our city, and you can't put that number on what that zoo does bring in tax revenues. So we're working on it, Glenn. Do I ever see closing that gap? No, I really don't. So a really long answer, but it's just hard to say what's the stopping point, how much do we want to invest in the community into that facility.
No, I guess I just have to say we're kind of victim of our own success with that zoo out there, that we've got a beautiful zoo, but it does come with a significant cost to the community, and I guess if the community is willing to continue to support that, I'm all for it, but it is definitely a significant cost to us.
Right.
Agreed.
Other questions? I'm trying to break a record on getting through budget hearings quickly. Councilman Lallam.
I didn't want us to get out of here too early. So, hey, TK, are you still on the line, please?
Absolutely.
I'm looking through that softball, baseball complexes, things of that nature. We are looking at doing scoreboards foundation, correct?
We're actually put that into the O&M side versus the capital. But
Okay,
yes, the three of the four are slated for repair and not repair, replacement in 2021. And I am approaching the Baseball Association to also be a contributor to that project, along with talks with the Community Foundation, as that's the namesake of that complex. So no, those are long overdue, and we do have a plan for replacement.
that was part of my questions. I'm glad that one was answered there. Regarding Cook, they have on there about replacing that danger slip on the infield. Is that a project that we're looking at doing early next year or late this fall? What's the plan on that?
You know, I'm gonna try to work with Heath if he gets, you know, a little, as, you know, the conversation he had earlier, I feel guilty about pulling him to do elevations to reverse the Chili Bowl effect back to a crowned infield. We have now budgeted 2 years in a row for new infield material. But I do need elevations to get the final quantities of what that's gonna take per field. So I would expect, honestly, Councilman, is probably see that as a spring project with majority of the work completed prior to the season, and anything that we missed would be fall of 2021.
Is that something that we could, you know, maybe look out to some of those organizations to see if they'd be willing to help, or is this gonna be kind of on the city only type of deal?
No, you know, anytime we do something to the complexes, I reach out. It's not a demand, but, you know, they earn the dollars, and every association we have is willing to put those dollars back in the facility. So no, it's definitely a conversation. I don't rely on it, but we can get our scope of work increases with every dollar they can put forth. So that will be a conversation I have with them. And the more dollars we get, you know, whether that's city and private donations from associations, the more work we can get done.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You bet.
All right. Next question. You guys are too easy. You didn't cut anything. All right. Well, it's not like you can't bring up questions if they pop into your head later. Can always do that. Kristen, did you want to say something?
I did. I think there's a couple things just that I wanted to point out. As we look at the general fund, the one piece that gets difficult is and I'm not picking on Rob and his department, but the street and snow removal equipment is one of our most expensive equipment purchases, probably throughout the city. And it does sit in the general fund. So I know the mayor had went through and she pointed out some ways that we can possibly, you know, get more revenue to come in. Another option or a thought that I'd like to put into the council's mind a little bit is our capital improvement fund currently is restricted. It's self-restricted by us, by our community when we did ordinance. We have allowed for other purchases to come out of that fund. We allow for the purchase of ambulance. We allow for the purchase of the fire trucks. E911 gets a transfer out of there. So there is the opportunity that until maybe we can essentially find some of those revenue sources or feel like we can build up that general fund, another option is to look at that ordinance that restricts the capital improvement fund and allow for some of these bigger equipment purchases to be made out of that fund. So it's a thought that I kind of wanted to put out there to the council. I don't know if anybody has any questions about that. Obviously, it probably can't happen this budget, but I think if we continue to see $2 million worth of bigger capital purchases, I don't know if the general fund can sustain that.
Councilman Bueller?
Thank you, Mayor. Would this be a good topic perhaps at one of the upcoming council meetings to change those restrictions? And then maybe the question you might want to address as well for the group is how many other communities do that relieve some of those restrictions to allow for those types of purchases?
That's a good question. You know, we are, I think, one of the only few bigger communities that still use pretty much 100% of the capital improvement fund for the capital projects. A lot of communities are splitting it, whether it's 75 stays in capital improvement, 25% of that tax goes into the general fund. So we've maintained our capital improvement fund for a very long time. It is nice because our capital improvement fund does pay for all of our debt. So when we do bond, we know that we have that money there, and then we're still able to do a lot of our projects. But a lot of other communities have started to kind of have to play the shift, just because the general fund is the heavy fund of every city. It is your public safety, it is your public works, it is your administration. People, the personnel in the general fund, it is expensive. So if your only revenue is your taxes with property tax and sales tax, it starts to get tight. So I think that's why other communities start to have to borrow from their second penny.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Councilman Lallam.
Thank you, Mayor. Kristen, on that, how do we come up with the restrictions on who we can use the capital outlay for? I mean, we have fire, we have rescue, we got a couple of other ones. How did that go from, I'm guessing it was just capital improvements versus, personnel? Do we make changes to it?
A long time ago, it was actually a state law that dictated the 2 pennies. And then they removed that requirement, and then a lot of the communities, the cities, still continue to maintain that first penny and second penny split. We have done so by ordinance, and I don't have all the back history on it, but we have over time, I believe, allowed for certain purchases. And I know like the one with the fire and ambulance is a fire truck is $750,000. An ambulance is, $300,000. Those were, you don't want to go out for a loan. So I think then we slowly relax some of the purchases that can be made with our cap. And like I said, our ordinance is restricted. It's a self-imposed restriction. So it's something that the council would need to look at as an ordinance.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how we got there on just a certain amount of items. I mean, you think about it, a road grader's a
Big
couple
tickets,
$100,000. The grapple tree,
Yeah.
the tree grapple, unit is 600,000. Yeah, it's a lot of money. So if we went by dollar amount, there's other items that could easily fall into that.
Right. Councilman Roby?
In the street department, I didn't see anything in there about snow gates.
Right.
Are we done with them? And the ones we have, what do we do with them if we are done with them?
Well, the council needs to make that choice. Actually, I spoke with the street superintendent a little bit today, and I know he needs to know, but he hasn't, I don't think he's really asked the question yet. And if you're ready to make that call, then we can liquidate the snow gates if you're choosing to abandon that, or we need to get serious with investments to buy enough to do the whole city if you want to go with snow gates. And because we don't have nearly enough snow gates to do our whole city. We've been in a trial basis for years now, and the people that have them are constantly telling us how to do it because we're doing it wrong. We don't use them in every storm, and there's all of that controversy that goes around them. It's up to the council, and if you feel like you're ready, we can put that on one of the next agendas to discuss it. Councilman Roby?
Thank you. I was looking for that, I didn't see it, and I was happy about that, because I think you're right, Mayor. We've kind of been doing, sort of been doing it, and then some people benefit it, but a lot of people don't. But I recall when Superintendent Baining gave that presentation, that's a very expensive item.
It is.
That doesn't benefit that many people,
Right.
in my opinion.
Right. Well, and we need to duplicate it over and over again to do the whole city. So we have some very serious conversations coming if you want to do snow gates for everyone. Otherwise, yeah. Did you want to add to that, Heath?
Yeah, if I could. And I know Rob's on the line if he wants to chime in too, but I just wanted to simply state that I know Rob wanted to come back with one final discussion, what we hope to be a final discussion, to make some determinations coming into this winter. Whether we continue with snow gates or not does drive some of our decision making on pending equipment purchases yet this year. But then also helps Rob get his crews set up and planned accordingly on whether he's running snow gates or not. Because if you recall from some of his prior discussions and presentations, having those snow gates modifies his plowing plan for any snow event. And not having them would create a whole different plan for him to utilize his staff accordingly. So that is something we could definitely bring back to a Public Works Committee meeting and try to get that finalized here soon. Rob, do you want to add to that timeline-wise?
Yeah, I think, before winter, actually pretty soon, we should get back together and discuss it and make a decision on which way we're going. Because it will make a difference on our purchases for equipment throughout the future from now. And we do have budgeted for this year for a motor grader, which I was kind of hoping for some guidance on with a snow gate, but we do have to replace a motor grader either way. We definitely are due to replace. We have 3 of them that are in pretty tough shape. They're getting older and close to their life cycle use. So we'll have to decide soon enough.
Okay, very good. Councilman Bueller?
Thank you, Mayor. We've discussed this we've been through this 3 times, and I think it's time that this thing gets resolved. We need to put it on the agenda and make a decision. We know the contractors, most of them don't have the equipment to run them. We know that it takes more people to plow these routes. It's much a slower process. I think we've got to make a decision soon. I certainly don't think we want to budget for more gates this year or for 2021, especially in lieu of our situation. I don't see that, but I think we need to bring this to a close.
Thank you. I would second that if I could. Councilman Rademski?
I'd have to agree with that. It seems to me that, listening to Rob and the presentations he's given, the amount of time it takes, and they break down, and the repairs are not cheap, and with what we're facing for budget crisis right now, we're already $3.5 million in the red. Plus we still allow cul-de-sacs to be built in some areas of town where they're not practical at all to be used in a cul-de-sac, and those motor graders are not cheap. I think it's just time to put it to bed, and I would be in favor of eliminating snow gates altogether.
All right. Councilman Villar.
I want to circle back to Kristen's comment a couple minutes ago. I definitely would like to see this get on a Public Works Committee agenda too, because this is Finance Committee too. This is a critical topic that you and I had the conversation a couple years ago, Kristen, that I think it is time that we look at how we do utilize our 2 pennies or our second penny. So I would definitely invite this as a topic at an upcoming committee meeting.
All right. Very good. Anyone else have anything else? Well, we're not quite done. I need to ask. Oh, someone has their hand up. Terry Kelly, you have your hand up. Please tell us why.
Thank you. I'm going to do something for the first time in the history of budget meetings. I had the conversation with you, Mayor, as far as the ice resurfacer. Just wanted the council to know it is getting to its age. And I was just sitting here thinking about Heath's request for the engineer 2. I do want to, really explain that we do have a need for that, but we can get through another season. This has just been kind of rolling along with the new ice arena. But with Heath's engineering 2, I'd be happy with the amount of work that Heath takes off my plate to forego that for a year and use that $100,000 to fund Heath's $90,000, so it didn't affect the general fund, but with an understanding, knowing I would be coming back for it. So I'm the first staff to ever voluntarily give something back. Just for conversation.
TK,
So-
you may have just brought a tear to my eye. I'm not sure, but I think you maybe did.
Well, no, it is. I think the amount of work, Heath, that you and your staff have saved me. It's just I know the general fund's tight, and that is a project we could forego and help the Public Works Department out as they help us. So just topic for conversation.
Great. Thank you very much, Terry. Appreciate that. Councilman Holeen?
Thank you. If you need a specific motion to act upon what TK just said, I would be making that. I will say that I was well, I'm married to someone in the hockey organization, so she was reporting back on the condition of the ice arena now. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but we're also in the context of having a larger conversation. Hopefully we will be building ice sometime in Watertown's future. So I'd rather be smart with the money and devote it to new ice if we could ever make that happen. And TK's proposal seems to fall right in line with being a good budget proposal, and also looking forward to new ice if that happens. If it doesn't happen, we can always just come back and do the request next year.
Very true. Okay, so we have a motion to remove the ice resurfacer from the 2021 budget. Is there a second? Second by Councilman, motion by Councilman Holeen and a second by Councilman Lallam. Is there any further discussion on that? Kristen?
The only thing is I think too, part of that motion, if that's truly what the council wants to do, I think what Terry's trying to do is offset his transfer, essentially. So part of the motion would be also to reduce the transfer to the Park and Rec.
True, yes, I missed that part of it. So is that good
Do
with?
you want to amend your motion?
I would do as Kristen suggested. I wasn't specific when I said that, but that's what I was thinking TK would say as well.
Right, thank you. Councilman Lallam?
I'll still second that.
All right, so.
Mayor, may I, just one other, do we need to then earmark that for 2022? Would that be a part of this motion to move that forward into the budget?
We will review the long-term capital in October. So I'll just make a note that I will place that into 2022 and we can discuss that during the long-term budget meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion about that? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Oh, Councilman Holeen, your hand is up. Sorry, did I miss you? Nope. Okay,
No, I'm sorry. I just had raised it to make
Okay.
that motion.
okay. All righty. Any other discussion before we move on to old business? All right. Kristen?
I can't let you guys off this easy. So, you know, I like numbers. So there's only probably two other things that I just want to point out to the council to kind of make everyone aware. So when the mayor went over the capital improvement fund, it was talked about how we set aside quite a bit for capital outlay. I do want to mention that a couple of the projects that are in the 20. So there is some I guess kind of shuffling that's going to happen, and you'll get to see that more when we do discuss the long-term capital. But there are two projects that are in the capital improvement fund that I think it's important to note. The first one is that downtown park is in the budget for 2021, and then the transfer out. I know it looks really heavy, and that would be the $5 million that would be to cover the airport terminal project. My plan with that is I put the 5 million in there, and I think that's an up to amount. We're still at that bidding stage. We're still at the not quite knowing how everything's going to shake out. So the 5 million is in there, and my plan would be that I would not transfer any more to the airport fund than what's necessary to do that project. So I didn't know if anybody from the council had any questions on that in regards to the capital improvement fund.
Are you comfortable with the timing of the cash flow, that's enough? With the terminal?
Yes, I think it will be. You know, the nice thing is when I start to turn around the reimbursement request, we are receiving our money probably within about that 30 to 45 days. So,
Okay.
so I think we'll be fine.
Good, very good. Okay.
If there's no questions on that, the only other thing that I want to point out, in the enterprise fund on the wastewater, Mike has his Clarifier 2 projects coming up, and we've kind of been going back and forth and discussing the wastewater fund in regards of its cash to cover that project. I don't think we anticipated it being quite as much as it's looking like. So I just want the council to be aware that as that project proceeds, Mike has, Mike can correct me if I'm wrong, because I know he's online, that we have kind of got our spot, because we do anticipate going out for a loan to cover that project.
Any questions about that, council? It's the Clarifier project is going to be an SRF loan. Any questions? Mike, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just that, we have talked about that, and the first step in going out for a funding package is, of course, getting on the state water plan, and that the next application deadline for getting on the state water plan would be October 1st. After that, the next opportunity to get on the state water plan would be February 1st, 2021. So that's something we should talk about among staff and decide at what point we should proceed with an application to going on the state water plan. And with that, the State Division of Financial and Technical Assistance had informed us back when we were evaluating the need for this project that they would accept HDR's their report where they recommended replacing rather than rehabilitating that tank. They would accept that engineering report as the preliminary engineering report that's required by the plan application. So we've got the engineering report. We could do a state water plan application at any time. And I think that, again, the next opportunity would be October 1st deadline.
Wow, that's great. That's really nice. They're letting us do that. It takes one step out, makes it easier. Very good. Any questions, council? Thank you, Mike. Okay, I'm about to do old business. Is there any old business? All right. Any new business? None. Are there any liaison member reports? Silence. None. Announcements.
Rita, I don't want to steal your thunder, but do I understand right, listening to the airport board meeting, that we're going to get our $1 million supplement whether or not we hit the 10,000 employments or not this year?
That was my understanding, but I think Todd is still on, and I think Todd could speak to it better than I could. There's a lot of rules that are being amended during this year because of COVID. It's just such a crazy year in the everywhere, but airline industry especially has just been, no one could have predicted it. So Todd, I'd pass it off to you, but yes, that's my understanding.
Thank you, Reed. Yes, that is absolutely true. They're going back to our 2018 employments, and since we were over the 10,000 employments in 2018, we will be receiving the $1 million.
All right, thank you. Any other liaison member reports? Councilman Roby?
I just have a brief announcement. It's always kind of fun to put on some good news. This was just in the public opinion yesterday, I believe. Justin Albee, Lieutenant Albee, was named the Lieutenant of the Year for all the South Dakota military lieutenants. He's with headquarters and headquarters battery of the 147th Field Artillery Battalion, and he was the exceptional lieutenant for the state of South Dakota. I just thought I'd point that out. It's good to see our local military making a mark. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. Any other announcements? Okay, we do not have a need to go into executive session tonight pursuant to SDCL 1-25-2, and we're out of business, so I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Good
No
night.
meeting tomorrow. Tomorrow's meeting is canceled.